There's a lot of treasure in the book of Esther. If you're familiar with the story, Esther was a Jewish girl. She was an orphan, had been reared by her uncle Mordecai, and they lived in a kingdom ruled over by an absolute monarch of the Medes and Persians named Ahasuerus. In history, he's called Xerxes, and he was a very powerful, despotic ruler, had tremendous power. He had a beautiful queen, and you'll find that he was celebrating all of his successes. In the first chapter, verse 10, he had a big party going with all the leaders from all over the kingdom had come in to celebrate the greatness of his reign, and his queen was ordered to make her appearance because he wanted people to see what a beautiful wife he had. Well, she didn't want to make an appearance. Matter of fact, she just said, "I'm not coming." And that didn't set too well with the king. He didn't care for that too well, and some of his lieutenants came to him and said, "Now, if word of this spreads throughout the kingdom, all the wives will tell their husbands when they say, 'Come here, I want to see you,' they'll say, 'Forget it. The queen doesn't have to report in, I don't either. And it's just going to be a mess.'" Well, they thought about it, and they decided that's pretty bad. And this is in the first chapter. And so they made a decree of the king. Now, the laws of the Medes and Persians were irrevocable. You could not put them out of existence. It was some sort of an idea that when the king spoke, it was so right that you couldn't change it. So they got him to write a law, and that wives should give their husbands honor, both great to the great and small. That's in verse 20. And they sent out letters all over the province, and he disposed of his queen and decided to have, they'd had a big search through the kingdom then to locate a new queen, and they searched for the fairest young ladies in the land, fairest virgins in chapter 2, and they sent runners everywhere, and it was more than a Miss America contest. This was a race for the queen. Now, these gals had to prepare themselves for 1 year. They went through it after they were chosen. They chose only the most beautiful virgin girls, and after they were chosen, they had to go through a year of intensive preparation. And, I mean, you really had to want to be the queen to fool with this, put up with all this. And they went through an intensive course of perfuming and dressing and grooming and everything else. And you'll find the story of that in the second chapter. And Mordecai heard of this, and he told his niece Esther that she should present herself as a candidate to be the queen. When she did, the fellow who was in charge of this business liked her very much. God gave her favor with him. She was fair and beautiful, verse 7. And so then they began to, after the preparation of the girls, when they bring Esther in, to make a long story short, when they were bringing the girls in to present them to the king, when his eyes fell on Esther, he fell madly in love with her. She must have been quite a gal. And the Lord gave her favor in his sight, a very beautiful woman. And she goes in, and he chooses her then to be the queen. Now, verse 17 says, "The king loved Esther above all women. She obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen." And then he makes a big feast, and he calls it Esther's Feast, and he makes a release to the provinces. He gives them special tax benefits and other nice things to celebrate the marrying of his beautiful new queen. Now, Mordecai sat in the king's gate. He was a Jew, and Mordecai had instructed Esther, "Don't tell anybody that you are Jewish. Just keep it to yourself." So she didn't. You'll notice all the way through, Esther is an unusual girl. She was an orphan. She was reared by her uncle, and she was obedient to her uncle. He said, Esther, I think you need to go and present yourself in this contest about being the queen. She did this, and sure enough, God gave her grace and favor in the sight of the king, and she was chosen above all the others to become the queen. And Mordecai told her, now don't go around saying I'm a Jewish girl. Just don't say anything about it at all. So she obeyed him in this. And in the last part of the second chapter, there were a couple of the fellows who were in the king's governmental operation, pretty high up, and they got into a conspiracy to depose the king or to kill him, to hurt him, and Mordecai heard about it. And he sent word to Esther and said, Esther, you report this because these men are planning to do harm to the king. So Esther did this. She went to the king and she told him that it was Mordecai who had reported on it, and so the king had it written in the books. By the way, they inquired about the matter, and the two fellows were hanged. And that did away with that little conspiracy. But it was recorded in the king's records that Mordecai, the Jew, had come forward with evidence that had saved the king's life and caused these two traitors to be executed. Now, the story moves along, and there is a man named Haman in chapter 3, and he is an Agagite, and he advanced him, the king did, set him his seat above all the princes and that were with him, and all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Uh-oh. Now, can't you see this? Now, this man has climbed to a position of favor with the king to such an extent that he is given a great position. So much so that the king gives orders that when Haman comes by, they should bow and say, Lord Haman, or something of this sort. Very respectful, very reverential. They're to bow and to greet him. So he's going along, and he's quite enjoying this. You know, he's quite important. He goes along, and everybody's saying, Hail, Haman. Oh, yes, it's good to see you, Lord Haman. And, oh, yes, the gods favor you, and all this kind of thing. And then he comes to Mordecai, sitting in the gate. And Mordecai said, Hi, Haman. Oh, boy. I mean, you know, everybody else is falling all over themselves to get favor with this fellow because he has the ear of the king, and the king listens to him and is interested in him. And here is this Jew sitting in the gate when he comes by. Oh, hi, Haman. He doesn't bow. He doesn't make a big fuss about it. He's not impressed with Haman, obviously. Now, the king's servants in verse 3 said, they come to Mordecai and they say, Why are you transgressing the king's commandment? Does this bring to mind another case of some people? How about Daniel's book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? At the sound of the music, you will fall down and worship the golden image that the king has made. O king, we do not have to be careful how we answer thee. Be it known unto thee this day that we will not fall down and worship the idol. And you can do with us what you will. Our God, by the way, if he wants to, can take us out of the fiery furnace. But if he doesn't, we'll be out of your hand one way or the other. If he takes us out of the fiery furnace, we're out of your hand. If he takes us home to glory, we're out of your hand. See, you can't get a hold of fanatics. I mean, if they're not afraid to die, if they're not afraid of what man can do to them, then you can't stop them. There's no threat they can bring against you that will work. The people who will succeed in deliverance, and you knew I was going to get to that, didn't you? The people who succeed in deliverance are those that the devil has exhausted all his trump cards on. And they will not break, bend, nor give way, no matter what he does. I mean, he can withdraw the favor of their friends. He can withdraw and cause misunderstandings in families. He can cause misunderstandings in churches and Christians and everything else. And he can cause them to feel like they're the Lone Ranger. And even Tonto spits when they pass. You know, I mean, you can just get that way, you know. And the devil said, see, it doesn't pay to go this route. You're dumb. Everybody doesn't. Everybody believes different from you. You must be wrong. Well, not necessarily. They told Noah, said, you're wrong. You've only got 7 members in your congregation. Everybody else is packing out the other churches. You're bound to be wrong, Noah. Now, he was the minority before the flood, but after the flood, he was the majority. There wasn't anybody else left. And friend, we may be in the minority now, but I'd rather be in the minority and be right, because there's coming a day when God's going to even this thing up. It's not always going to be as uneven as it is now. Well, Haman came along, and when Mordecai wouldn't give him reverence, the king's servants said, oh, why are you doing this? And he said, well, I'm a Jew. Oh, one of those. Yeah, they are strange, aren't they? They don't believe in bowing to a man. They bow only to their God. They don't reverence anybody but the Lord himself. They give reverence to him. Well, verse 5, when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. Doesn't that sound familiar? Now Nebuchadnezzar, when he heard that these 3 boys refused consistently to bow down to him, he brought them in, and he confronted them, said, is it true? They said, true it is. We're not going to. And then it says, the form of his visage, his face, was changed against Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, whereas before he had given them favor and had loved them and been kind toward them. Now he's filled with demonic hatred because they do not bow. Now there's nothing that makes the devil angrier than people who will not bow. I mean, when Satan gives an order, bow, he wants everybody to do it. And when there's one sticking up that doesn't bow, oh boy, he goes to work. You will bow or I'll make you bow. Well, he, first of all, he thought, well, if I jump on Mordecai, it'll be very obvious what's the matter. You're just mad because he doesn't bow down to you. That makes you look kind of like a pig, you know. He was smarter than that. He said, I'll trump up a charge against his race, and we'll just jump on the whole race and I'll get him. Did you know the devil's that mean? He'll go after a whole group of people to get the one that's bothering him. And this is what he did. Now, he goes in to the king. He said, "O king, I have discovered a dreadful conspiracy, and I must tell you about this. The Jews are planning to destroy your kingdom." "Why, Haman, are you sure?" "Oh, yes, your majesty. I would have never brought you word unless I was dead sure. I just caught it just in time. But I'll tell you what, these Jews want to destroy you. They're scattered." Verse 8, he says, they're scattered abroad and dispersed among the people. They're scattered all around, these traitors, and their laws are diverse from all people. Why, they're different from everybody else. That's pretty good testimony, isn't it? Did you know the devil always hated God's folks because they were different from the rest of the bunch? Did you know that if you get different from the crowd, they'll hate you too? You say, "Oh, but everybody's supposed to love you." That's not what Jesus said. He said, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him." Amen? Or oh me.